Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3. Is it working or doing anything? No? Testing 1, 2, 3.
Office is the Wednesday, August 15th, 2018 Public Safety and Justice Committee meeting at 2 p.m.
No, I don't want to interrupt.
There we go.
Did you do the recording already?
All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start the August 15th Public Safety and Justice Committee meeting. It's 2 o'clock. And Colin, instead of taking roll, I'm going to ask that we start with Dr. Jordan on that end, do self-introductions. You can follow that?
Sure, yes.
Good enough. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Dr. Michelle Jordan, Chief Medical Examiner for the Medical Examiner Coroner's Office.
Hi, good afternoon. Laura Garnett, Chief Probation Officer.
Good afternoon, Damon Silver from the Public Defender's Office.
Lori Smith, Sheriff.
Aaron Johnson, Director of Pretrial Services.
Oop, you got to get your,
How about that?
There
Is
you
that
go.
better? Patricia Lucas, Superior Court.
thank you. Mike Wasserman, District 1 Supervisor.
Ken Yeager, District 4 County Supervisor.
Jeff Smith, County Exec.
Rob Coelho from County Counsel's Office.
Gary Herzig, Deputy County Executive.
Sylvia Perez McDonald, Director, Independent Defense Counsel Office.
Wonderful. Thank you all for being here. And as I think everybody out there knows very, very well, if you wish to speak, please fill out speaker form cards here. The clerk will pick them up, and we will call you to come forward to speak on the item that you've indicated that you wish to speak on. Thank you very much. And this is a 6. Public comment. All righty. That brings us to public comment, which is the opportunity for anyone to speak about anything not on today's agenda. Thank you to those who've submitted cards. Mr. Scott Largent, come on forward, followed by Susan Bassey. Or in reverse order. Ms. Bassey, come on forward. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Welcome.
Thank you. As many of you know, my name is Susan Bassey. I've been a publisher and a member of this community for over 30 years. First, I'd like to start with an apology to Lori Smith. A few months ago, when I started investigating some stories related to domestic violence, I was under a false impression of things that officers from your office had done when they had not in fact done that. So I personally apologize to you for any comments that I made that may have been my opinion and been misguided. Next, I'd like to ask the clerk to please copy records that I received from the Attorney General's office and also from the State Bar. And I would like to note that I think at this point in our community, the greatest threat to our public safety and our justice system is the conduct of several people in that system related to free speech and journalists. Patricia Lucas, you recently sat on the Judicial Council and you were privy to comments that were made by Mr. Largent and others that are going viral across the internet. People are talking to you about what is going on in our family courts. Those subjects have been completely ignored. In 2004, our county, our Santa Clara County grand jury, indicted Judge William Dancer for ticket fixing related to Los Gatos police. George Kennedy prosecuted that, and over 20 days, a jury of 12 of our citizens sat and found Judge Dancer guilty for PC violation 182A5, 96.5, and Government Code 8920. The district attorney's office in the county have been complicit, indifferent, and inefficient in their public records requests. I have had to go to other agencies to get these records. The fact that we prosecuted a judge and 12 members of our public found that judge guilty of ticket fixing traffic tickets, and we have done nothing as a society since then to investigate how judges in our courts are behaving, is appalling. That issue involved the Los Gatos Little League and the Los Gatos Police Department. Patricia Lucas is aware that there are judges, Judge James Towery, whose wife is Karen Sununu Towery, a former prosecutor, issued a restraining order, which is now a permanent restraining order, against a woman who tried to bring forward child abuse and pedophile issues. They restrained that woman from speaking to Boy Scouts of America and Little League in Los Gatos. There is corruption in our county, and our district attorney is more worried about his public image and his opinions in the San Jose Mercury than he is about investigating public corruption, the lawyers in his office, and the judges who may be acting improperly in our county. I'd like to leave this document, and I'd like to leave you all with a thought. It is very unlikely that Judge Dancer, whose wife is Catherine Gallagher, and who continues to preside over family law matters through JAMS, has simply evaporated the corruption in our community. Thank you.
Okay, Scott, come on forward, followed by Michael Lazarin and Deborah Powers. And whoever gets there first can speak. Scott, you'll have up to 3 minutes.
Oh, great. Thank you. Sorry about that. I was rushing from the car. Just give me 1 second. Sorry about that. 1 second. Normally I'm a little more prepared. Oh, well. Here we go. All right. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Scott Largent. How are you doing today? My real problem right here. This was a big speed bump in my recovery right here. Judge Stuart Scott. And he is the judge that thought it was appropriate to order the Santa Clara County Sheriffs to come to my grandmother's house to harass me. I put that video up online. A lot of people are chiming in on it. It's a very important video for people to watch a judge abuse his power. We are all very familiar with what happened with Judge Stuart Scott and how the CJP failed us and didn't properly reprimand him. And when they reassigned him after he went through his little punishment stint in traffic court, he reemerged in a family court proceeding. Now, not the one involving my child. It was a DV out of Los Gatos, and I have a pretty interesting set of family out of there. They're actually quite wealthy. They like to kick people when they're down, and we had a business deal that went south. And so what they decided to do is rig the system and try to get me as far away from Los Gatos as possible to call them out on their stuff. My daughter had her first birthday party. There was no restraining order. They had this big elaborate event over there, fully catered at Rinconada Hills, okay? And family members were told that I did not want to attend my daughter's first birthday party. She had a pretty princess party over there, and you better bet I wanted to be there. I was 6 months sober. I was like, I'm going to be there. So what I proceeded to do was try to go to the party, and of course I was told I cannot go to the party at the gate there. It was just, I wanted to make sure I showed up. So what I did is I went and got one of Grandma's dresses, and I got my Dad's Lives Matter sign, and I stood out on the corner on Pollard Road right here. And I had my sign, a little crown, and then I took the actual invitation that my rich family out of Monteserino, Los Gatos made and kind of put my picture on here. Long story short, this is why Judge Stuart Scott gave my mother a restraining order, because I protested on Pollard Road. I was not blocking a sidewalk there. Law enforcement was never called. I wasn't screaming and yelling at anybody. I wanted to make sure my daughter knew I would be at her party. And even if I was standing on the corner, that's what would have happened. So after the proceeding with Judge Stuart Scott, he said I was guilty, guilty, guilty of my drug diversion program. That was supposed to be a slap on the wrist. He said guilty, guilty, everything like that. Charges were dropped. Everything went away. So now I have a clean criminal record right now. But Judge Stuart Scott didn't think that was the case. He just annihilated me. And then when I went over there to figure out how to complain, what the process was, he basically machinated against me and sent law enforcement to my home. That's very unacceptable. And I've been putting these videos online. I just didn't think that you could really get a 5-year restraining order for putting on a dress and holding up a sign. I didn't think I could get arrested out in front of court for using a kid's toy to protest. This is very. Oh, thank you, Mike.
Thank you. You betcha.
Made a little mess up here. I'm
Deborah
sorry.
Powers, Michael Lazarin. Neither one still here. Yep, right there's. No, that's ours.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. My bad. I made a big mess up here.
So, final call for Ms. Powers or Mr. Lazarin? Are you Ms. Powers? Alrighty.
Excuse me while I read. Good afternoon, supervisors and committee members. I'm a mother who lived with a man who I never thought would beat me, but he did. A mother who thought that this man would never hurt our daughter, yet he did. Every attempt I made to leave home with our daughter and my 2 boys, I was beaten and threatened on my life. I was beaten and a threat was made on my life. On one occasion, I can recall this man grabbed our 6-month-old daughter and refused to hand her over until I promised to stay in the home. I had to call the police to assist for fear of what he would do to our daughter. After 6.5 years of marriage, I had enough courage and strength to leave this man. My abuser in May 2011, after my abuser was charged with corporal punishment on a spouse in Santa Clara County, I moved out of our home into a hotel with our youngest daughter, 5 years old at the time, and my son, 11 years old. My oldest son, who was serving his first tour in Afghanistan in 2011, heard about the displacement of his family. He came home on his 2-week leave and gave every dime he earned to secure a new home for his sister, brother, and myself, and continued to support us until I was able to get back on my feet. Although I had left my abuser, I was faced with another challenge, the custody of our daughter. While the criminal case in Santa Clara County was pending, I was awarded temporary legal and physical custody of our daughter. I had placed all my faith into a system that would later fail our daughter and myself. Judge Takeichi in 2015 took it upon himself to be judge, jury, and executioner, not affording my right to due process to cross-examine any witness who alleged wrongdoing on my part. Instead, Judge Takeichi ignored the 3044 finding prior to the 5-year limitation, ignored the abuser's criminal history, which involved 2 felony DVs, 4 assault and batteries, 1 count child abuse against our daughter, corporal punishment on a spouse, and an active warrant for his arrest in Georgia, violation of probation, and committing another active DV against me. Takeichi took the abuser's testimony as gold, that he complied with everything without documentation, and awarded him sole legal and physical custody of our daughter, and labeled me an alienating parent. My abuser continues to use the family court to continue the abuse and control over me since he was able to secure a job at Western Digital, who neglected to do a background check on him, and he is making a 6-figure income at this current time. What happens next? With a title as an alienated parent, every action I take is scrutinized. Our daughter, who has tried to commit suicide now 2 times, the most recent attempt being January 2018, as a punishment against me for taking her to the ER at her request for fresh cut open wounds to her wrist, my visits were suspended completely. It's now been 8 months since I have had any contact with her. So I ask you, how does the system fail victims of domestic violence, and most of all, the children? Domestic violence, in my opinion, is not a troubled marriage. It's a crime. While I'm being punished for protecting our daughter from future harm, why am I being punished for protecting our daughter from future harm? And more importantly, why does our daughter have to pay for the mistakes of a road judge who made a drastic order and placed our daughter with a convicted abuser? Thank you. Thank you.
And final call for Mr. Michael Lazarin.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Michael Lazarin. I've been a technical recruiter in the Silicon Valley for over 30 years with a lot of our top companies in the Silicon Valley. In 2012, I experienced every parent's worst nightmare when I found out my daughter had committed suicide on Facebook. My daughter is Audrey Pott. It's an international story. I've approached Sheriff Smith 3 months ago in regards to documents that I've recovered in regards to domestic violence that was going on in my daughter's home life, which was covered up by this district attorney. And I'm here to ask for answers. It's been over now 5 years. My family has never been addressed. I want answers on what happened to my daughter, and I'm going to continue to seek justice for my daughter. I'm asking the media, I'm going to be reaching out to national media attention on this issue, because my daughter should not be used, and her image should not be used for re-election purposes on any election. She was an innocent child that has been publicly humiliated with a false narrative on what happened to my daughter. And I want answers. I've done everything possible that I can. Right now, I've spent over probably $300,000 to $500,000 right now in legal fees right now against false lawsuits that have been put against me and my family to quiet me. I'm not stopping. I'm going to give everything in my will and my family's will to get answers. I am Michael Lazar, I'm the biological father of Audrey Pott. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public speaking portion of our agenda today. Chief Garnett, the microphone that's on between you and Damon, is that an extra one? That's neither of yours looking to speak. Okay. And for committee members, of course, if you wish to speak, just press the mic button. It'll light up and I'll recognize you. Supervisor Yeager, that moves us on to item number 3, which is to approve consent calendar, which currently includes items 8 through 10.
I make the motion to approve.
Motion made. I will second that. We don't have any, excuse me, I stand corrected. We have one speaker card on item 8. I'll ask Susan Bassey to return to the podium. Thank you. Committee members, any comments or questions regarding 8, 9, or 10? Seeing none. All right, thank you. Now it's 2 minutes for each speaker during this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to comment again on item 8, which is officer training for public safety and staff. There are a number of inconsistencies in how the sheriffs and all the police departments in our community are trained related to dealing with journalists and related to dealing with photography. Victims of domestic violence are in need to record their abusers. Abuse doesn't always happen with a punch to the face or a kick when somebody is watching. We've recently passed federal laws that allow abused persons to record their victims, even in states where two-party consent is required. Our law enforcement agencies record us with body cams. There is a reason for that. The people have a right to see what is going on related to issues of public safety. Our presiding judge, Patricia Lucas, has issued orders that attempt to criminalize dissent and criminalize photography. She has attempted to create our courts to be one of the most secret in the country. She has arrested and she has used our court systems to criminalize people who are trying to get information to the public that they have a right to know. She has done this in tag team with Jeff Rosen. Jeff Rosen knows because if there aren't cameras, he can spin the story later for a PR campaign to help him get reelected. What happened to Audrey Potts was about domestic violence that your office ignored. What happened to Clyde Berg when you falsely prosecuted him was about domestic violence that your office ignored. You have received hundreds of letters asking you to address these issues, Mr. Rosen, and you haven't done it. Blaming the sheriff's office for your faults is not appropriate. Yes, the training needs to be appropriate, but the policies need to be in place and they need to reflect our laws. Despite what Patricia Lucas does in our county, we are not a county that writes laws. We live under them. Thank you.
Thank you. And it looks like, Scott, you want to speak on one of these 3 items? Which item are you asking?
Sorry about that. It was item 8 that was on the consent.
Item 8.
Sorry, I didn't.
Okay.
My bad. I was Scott Largent. I was looking in the agenda packet in the back regarding the training topics because I did participate, and I'd have to say probably every meeting that involved the training for our sheriff's department. I was pretty actively involved in that. As you go through the bias training and the crisis intervention, I'm just wondering, are we going to put in some type of training to understand that gray area between our courts and our sheriff's department? I guess what I'm trying to get at is we go through all this stuff of creating surveillance policies. We have all these rules enacted to keep our sheriff's department in line, but how do we keep our courts in line? So what I'm trying to get at is there's, like, for instance, storage footage for video cameras in our court systems. We save that stuff for 13 months. In several proceedings right now, in court right now, the evidence has disappeared. So it doesn't apply to our surveillance ordinance right there, but what are we doing at our court system right there for stuff to end up disappearing like that? I'm very concerned about that. I'm also concerned that that judges have the ability to abuse their power and send law enforcement to harass people. I just didn't think that was even possible. What are we doing to repair that? Are we going to put an extra line in there? Are we going to be able to show the public, hey, this is what happens here, but it doesn't happen there? This confusion gets people arrested like me. This confusion makes it harder for me to, I borderline would have not been able to have seen my daughter if what happened out in front of that courthouse. If Lori didn't step to the plate, I would have just been asked out. And what I'm worried about is other people that want to protest. We've got to make it so they can understand what's going on and that they don't have to worry about that. I've met a lot of fathers out there. They're good guys, also mothers, but they're out there fighting, and they should be able to civilly and peacefully protest. And this is shameful. And I want this to work better. I'm not just here to rag on you, Patricia Lucas. I would just hope that you would listen to the public. Over a period of time, you have enough people coming in here criticizing your court system. And I'd rather do it in a more civil manner than just standing out there on a corner, but I can do that too. So thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public speakers on consent items 8, 9, and 10. We have a motion to approve and a second. Seeing no other comments or cards, that passes unanimously. Colin. Thank you. We now move on to item number 4, which is to receive a report from the Office of the County Exec relating to our juvenile justice system. Martha, welcome. Bless you. Take it away.
Martha Wapensky, Deputy County Executive.
Dolores Morales, Probation Department.
Ursula Vasquez Bluma with the Office of Cultural Competency.
So the Juvenile Justice Systems Collaborative meets quarterly to discuss interventions to reduce disproportionate minority contact and confinement of the youth of color here in Santa Clara County. I do want to take this opportunity to thank all the individuals who devote their time to this collaborative to raise these important issues and come up with initiatives to help the youth in our county. The robust amount of work done by the Race Equity and Justice Systems and also the Race Equity through Prevention work groups is included in the report. So I won't go into detail here, but a few of the highlights include there's a lot of good work coming out of the Gender Responsive Task Force to better respond to the needs of women and girls in the juvenile justice system. There's also a discretionary bench warrants project that looks at decreasing the unnecessary detention of youth with warrants issued who do not pose a risk to the community. We're also looking at leveraging community engagement opportunities, looking at prevention strategies, getting community input, and avoiding duplication of efforts. And finally, we're looking at projects related to prevention or reduction of chronic absenteeism and truancy, and that work is ongoing. Again, just a few of the highlights as part of this thick and robust report. We'll go ahead and take questions.
Thank you. We have no speaker cards on this item. Any questions or comments from staff members? None. Thank you very much. Oh, Supervisor Yeager.
Well, I just had to comment on our Chief of Probation's excellent op-ed in the Chronicle yesterday. You know, it was excellent. You know, I could see why you didn't submit it to the Mercury News because nobody reads the Mercury News anymore. But anyway, it was certainly well written, well presented, talking about Santa Clara County and the policies that we have of not sending juveniles under 13 to juvenile hall, and understanding the reason why we do that, and if when you do incarcerate earlier than that, it's more likely to lead to them doing bigger crimes, other crimes later on. But anyway, it was just very well done. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. And Martha, I will ask you one question regarding detention admissions. I noticed from 16 to 17, you've got a bullet point here, they increased by 10%. But I didn't know what the quantities were, and I'm a big guy on numbers and percentages. So if it increased from 10 to 11, not remarkable. But what exactly was that change, that 10%, and why?
The report's actually coming from the risk assessment instrument, and I could probably get back to you on the detention admissions, but there was a slight increase. There was an unusual increase in crime related to a specific group. And we could probably give you a little bit more detail, but we just have the total numbers right now. And if
Okay.
you don't mind, we can come back to you.
Off the agenda, if you could send us that. I was interested in what that was. And again, sometimes people use percentages that are misleading, and so it depends what that number is that it's an increase from. It may be nominal. So I just wanted your thoughts on that. Thank you very much. That was item number 4, and it's to receive reports. We don't need a motion. Oh, Chief,
I was
did you
going to
have
say, we'll have that for you by the end of the meeting.
Super. Thank you.
Can I make one quick comment?
Yes, please, Sylvia.
Now that it'll take me a little bit, but I also think that it really is an important thing to note. It's part of your report, but the reduction in the 20% override is actually quite significant, because the purpose of the risk assessment instrument is to make sure that the decision-making to detain is really based on objective data rather than subjective information that could lead to disproportionality. And I know this because a long time ago, I hate to age myself, but we worked on the risk assessment, and that was one of the initial challenges, was how do you create an objective tool where it isn't overridden by subjective criteria. And the fact that it now is reflected that 20% has been reduced, meaning that really there is fidelity to the use of objective factors, is actually a great thing to point out, and a great aspect of the decision-making that we should commend the probation department for doing, because we know that is really what's going to reduce the disproportionality. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. I do have the numbers for you. Actually, Maria did.
Thank you.
The numbers were 921, and they went up to 1,013 from 2016 to 2017.
Gotcha. And any thoughts or reasons why?
Well, we're doing an extensive RAI validation study that will be presented to the various groups in the fall. So
Okay, and you mentioned a specific group might have been the cause of that as well.
Through the chair, if I may,
Yes.
Supervisor Wasserman. So during 2017, as we reported earlier this year, we experienced an increase in younger youth who were coming to the department. We also experienced an increase in crime specific to the Lash Money Gang. So you're seeing these are duplicated numbers. So what you're seeing is that we had several youth who came into juvenile hall, or were booked into juvenile hall multiple times. And so we had a few core groups of youth who committed crimes quite prodigiously last year. And so that's what you're seeing as the increase, primarily.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation. And the commendation passed on from Sylvia. Thank you very much. The 20% is significant. All right, with that, we'll consider item number 4 received. Supervisor Yeager, we'll move on to item number 5. Item 5 is to receive a report from the Office of the Sheriff relating to academy recruitment and staffing levels. Sheriff Smith.
Good afternoon. Our training captain, James Jensen, recruiting lieutenant Vic Dela Cruz, Sergeant Chuck Crowell, and Melanie Jimenez will be presenting this report.
Thank you. Captain, welcome. Lieutenant, Sergeant, Melanie. Somebody draw the short straw. Okay, there you go.
Good afternoon, Council. If I'm a little too loud, let me know. Anyways, want to talk about some numbers, staffing. Currently, we have 52 true vacancies out of 844. This is as of July 29th for the custody side. We currently have 27 in the academy, Corrections Academy, which just started yesterday. And once they graduate, the number of vacancies should go down to 26. The Enforcement Academy, with enforcement vacancies, we have 53 vacancies out of 542 authorized. Once again, this is as of July 29th. We currently have 31 in the academy, Enforcement Academy, which started 2 weeks ago. Once they graduate in March, it's going to go down to 22 approximate. Now, this doesn't include potential resignations, retirements, and so forth. We do have academies scheduled through next year, and we will be scheduling additional academies. So we're going to average between 30 to 35 on each academy because we'll be losing through deputies through attrition. As far as recruiting, we are still continuing our recruiting efforts. We participate in job fairs, career fairs. We have some upcoming ones such as the Silicon Valley Pride Parade. We participating in that with a booth at the end of August. Some other upcoming ones, career fairs, job fairs, Sacramento Law Enforcement Hiring Expo, the annual Bay Area California Black Expo. Travis Air Force Base, we just attended that. Myself being a veteran and retired military reservist, I always like to partake in hiring a vet. Also, we continue to present at various colleges, local colleges, in the various classes. We also, as a recruiting effort, we resume what we call the Agility Series. Once a month on a Friday, we offer to the public, and this is all on our Go Sheriff website, where potential candidates can come and practice the agility test, as well as talk to a recruiter or background investigator, how the process is in terms of time to be hired. We also, in conjunction with ESA, we still test once a month, usually the third Saturday, like we have one this Saturday. And we average, in the last few months, we'd average about a little over 100, close to 200 applicants are scheduled. However, on average, between 40 to 50% will show up. So that numbers has improved. I also like to extend the invitation for the board council to come observe at the agility series or the testing process on the third Saturdays. We'll actually have you go through a practice physical agility test, although you'd have to sign a waiver to prevent county liability. Just kidding. We would make sure you wouldn't get injured, but we would like to have you extend an invitation to see how the process goes.
Supervisor Yeager's checking his schedule right now.
Okay. Nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Don't have any cards on this, so I'll turn to you, Supervisor, first, then committee members.
Certainly thank you for the report, and glad that you're attending so many community functions to try to get more recruits for the Sheriff's Department, so thank you for that. I know, Sheriff, that we had spoken before about often the length of time that someone actually applies for a job in the Sheriff's Department to the time they're actually notified and then start going through the academy. And I don't know if we've had any success in sort of shortening that period or having more contact with those individuals so we keep them interested and that they don't begin to look elsewhere for jobs.
So we have looked at bottlenecks in the process. One that we identified a few years ago was the wait time for the polygraph.
Right.
So we actually have 2 in-house polygraphers now and that perform the polygraphs. We also have worked with ESA so we can give ongoing tests and brought on additional background people. But I think what our recruiters are really good at doing now is keeping in contact with the recruiter and with the people in the testing process, because that was a problem where people didn't necessarily understand am I in the process, am I still involved? And keeping in contact has been very, very beneficial. In fact, I met with some of the academy people that were involved in last Saturday's active shooter drill that we did at the new BART station in Milpitas, and so many of them said that they chose the sheriff's office because the recruiters continually talked with them and kept in touch with them during the process, at least so they didn't feel that they dropped off. So I think we're always looking at ways that we can improve it, but I'm actually astounded at what a good job our staff does in filling the academies with the numbers of people that they do. It's virtually unheard of. We put some real pressure on them to get the process moving.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Largent, you wanted to speak on this item?
Thank you for taking that card last minute. I wasn't going to chime in.
Just barely made it.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. The You know, I talk with a lot of the sheriff's deputies a lot. You know, I'm down here all the time. I kind of interact with them. Good group of people. I've started to get to know a lot of them. What I'm worried about is people wanting to apply for the sheriff's department right now. What are we going to do to prevent them from looking bad to the public? Like, who's going to want to work for a sheriff's department when they're arresting fathers and harassing grandmothers? So see, that looks really bad. So when are we going to clean up our act with our courts and stop harassing and abusing the power from our judicial end right over here? Because I just think it makes the deputies look extremely bad. It makes our sheriff's department look bad. And we've got to point the finger in the right direction. Lori Smith didn't order him to come over to my house. Okay? It came from judges making bad orders. They had no reason to come over there. No probation, no parole. I don't even have a criminal record right now. So what I'm trying to get at right here is a lot of these deputies are good people. They didn't want to arrest me out in front of that courthouse. They really did not want to do that. They didn't want to come to the house and harass my grandmother. But Judge Patricia Lucas, you've got to keep your animals on a leash over there. You have more power than you're able to kind of get out right here. You need to let these judges know that they cannot do that. That past that sidewalk, it's the public sidewalk. And that's also my grandmother's front yard right there. She's very well taken care of, and if you can possibly relay that over to Judge Stuart Scott, that I don't appreciate him embarrassing me in front of all of our neighbors. Okay? All I wanted to do was complain about a judge. So you guys have heard it a lot, but the things aren't changing right now. They just really are not. And I'm sure, Judge Lucas, you'll probably send another one over here later this afternoon. So thank you.
Lieutenant, thank you for your report. Thank you for your service. One
Thank
comment
you,
I
sir.
had, I thought it was interesting, where you wrote, as an added effort to recruit military veterans, the Sheriff's Office received approval April 16th from the State of California Department of Industrial Relations. I read that and I thought it was a typo. I think that's a very interesting name for a department that you had to ask permission from, or get permission from, pre-approval from, before you began that recruiting of military veterans. Secondly, what I would like to ask is on the 4th page of your report, underneath the 8-column spreadsheet there, the second asterisk, I did not understand what the sentence said when it said the Sheriff's Office is anticipating at least as many retirements are projected to be overstaffed. So at the time of these academies, recruits will only be filling vacancies. What does that first part of the sentence before the paragraph mean? Or
so we can't really project our retirements. So what we do is we're calculating that we will be overstaffed. However, as we've experienced with our last few academies, that doesn't necessarily happen because we do get more retirements than we expect.
Okay, and to that point, your spreadsheet was very unique in that it gave a forward-looking projection, which for me looked at, you're estimating what recruitment classes would be, you're estimating what vacancies will occur and what retirements. Very difficult thing to do, but as a guy that likes charts, I appreciated your projecting what the trend might look like. And I understand you have no control over how many people apply, nor do you have control over how many people make it through your rigorous training. But I want to tell you that that chart you added in, I've never seen in a staff report before, giving that kind of a projection with so many unknowns. So I appreciate you're having the guts to do so. I understand, could be wrong, could be right, whatever, but I know the information there is to the best of your knowledge. So thank you for that. Any other comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, we will consider item number 5 received as well. We'll move on to item 6, which is to receive an annual report from the Office of Pretrial Services relating to release population trends. Aaron.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Supervisor Wassman. We've submitted our annual report for review, and 2 points of reference I just want to go over really quickly. One is our Community Accountability Program diversion outcomes, and I've noted the Humphreys decision date in our electronic monitoring program. These are 2 most recent developments for our population and our department. The diversion program is a collaborative effort with the District Attorney's Office and the Office of Reentry, specifically looking at pre-filing misdemeanor cases for diversion for those referred to our office. It's a crucial component in our criminal justice toolbox and gives the client the opportunity to complete certain conditions over a period of time in lieu of criminal prosecution, thereby avoiding a conviction on their record. Once the referral is made, our office makes contact. We meet with the client, schedule an intake, and explain the conditions. Once those conditions are met, we advise the DA of their completion status and close our case. With the overall success of the program, we're actually working with the DA's District Attorney's Office to look at ways to expand the pre-filing diversion to other cases. Also, one of the biggest changes we've experienced in pretrial across the state was the effect of the Humphreys decision out of San Francisco. This decision is currently under review by the California Supreme Court, but it's basically at arraignment or setting a bail or release decision is looking at considering non-monetary release options, or if a bail is set, if the individual has the ability to pay. Since this decision in January, we've seen an increase in the courts concurring with our release recommendations to just above 80%, which is an increase of almost 5% overall from where we were this time last year. With the increase, pretrial's average daily population has also increased, and we've also seen an increase in the overall EMP population. And while we're excited to see more clients being able to be released and work with our department, and the outcomes continue to be good overall, we want to caution the overuse of electronic monitoring conditions in lieu of traditional SORP release, as this is our highest level of supervision as well as our most intensive form. So we'll continue to monitor this and continue working with the Superior Court. And that concludes my report today for our trends. I'll take any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Director Johnson. We have a speaker card. We'll turn to speakers right now. Mr. Ron Hansen, come on forward. Welcome.
Good afternoon, panel. My name is Ron Hansen. Excuse me, I'm affiliated with PACT, People Acting in Community Together. First, a strong shout-out compliment to the Office of Pretrial Services for their continued important and impressive work. Also a compliment to the office for, as they state on slide 6, they measure what matters. These measurements, excuse me, these measurements show incredible success in releasing folks from jail without compromising public safety. Their measurements also show, however, what I consider and what I would think you might consider also an embarrassment to everyone on this panel. Slide 7 shows that despite this office's good work, for some reason, this county's pretrial incarceration rate remains stuck at a few points north of 70%, despite what California's average of 64 and the national average of 61%. So why is this? Well, I don't think it's because Santa Clara County residents are that much more violent or unruly than other Bay Area or California neighbors. I submit that it's because of the court and the DA's office desire to push back on these recommendations. If this pretrial population could be reduced to, say, 65%, not even what California's average is, based on today's jail population, that would result in about 300 of our neighbors not being in jail, thus saving this county about $1.3 million per month, or nearly $16 million per year. So I challenge all on this panel to establish a very modest goal of reducing our pretrial population to under 70% by the time this report comes to us in the next reporting period. I submit that in so doing, we will still remain able to sleep safely every night. Thank you.
Not for this one, for the next one?
Yeah, it's next one.
All right. Thank you, Supervisor Yeager. Sylvia, excuse me.
I just wanted to echo the comments made about the report. I think it's very impressive. I do think that it's noteworthy that there continues to be the same sort of success rate by measuring appearance and safety for those that were released. And so I think that the challenge of the reduction, both for the taxpayer resources that we're using, but also more importantly, there's a recognition really both in the Humphreys decision and just in general practice that for those in our population in the criminal justice system that can be safely in the community, we have to think long term that in the end we are doing a service to our public, and we are increasing safety because we are ensuring that our criminal defendants are adjusting and acclimating to the community. We want them to stay out so that they can remain employed. We ask them, we need them to stay out so that they can take care of their children and be providers and remain and keep the family stability. I mean, we know that detention often is necessary for public safety, but to the extent that we can do it safely, and not just as Aaron mentioned, putting them on EMP, but allowing them to be out so that they can be supervised by a county pretrial release officer and still have regular jobs. So I think the 5% challenge is reasonable and attainable, and I think it's a really great comment and a challenge for all of us because I think it's a win-win.
Thank you. Director Johnson, a question for you, if I may. Over the last few years, I've seen an increase in our diversion rate of people actually going to jail, and I've seen our jail population seeming to go down as we have different estimates on what size jail that we should build. Given the increase in diversion, the reduction in number of people actually going to jail, the chart 7 that Mr. Hansen referred to, the average daily percentage of jail population in pretrial stage, again, I'm looking at a smaller population actually going to jail. Do you think it is realistic to reduce this number somewhat more?
I think it's realistic to reduce that number some more. We recently were approved for this year to have a position to re-review cases where individuals who were recommended for release for whatever reason were not released. And so I think by targeting some of those cases, we can make the significant increase in getting the release population up.
Wonderful, thank you. Supervisor Yeager, any questions or comments?
I would also like to say it's a great report. Just to point out a couple of them. Again, the safety rate was very impressive. That I mean, as far as the number who do not commit any other offense during that pre-trial stage, very high. The one in June, 98.8, and the success rate as well. Again, very positive numbers, and I think it just shows that your department is doing very well and with all the activities of pretrial, and that it isn't really any issue of safety, that this is, as is just said, good for the community and good for the individuals as well. So appreciate it.
Thank you. And a lot more EMP work. That's for sure. I'm seeing the numbers, the electronic monitoring.
We're monitoring that as well, yes.
Yes, you're monitoring the monitoring. Good. All righty, that concludes item number 6. We'll consider that report received. We'll move on to item number 7. I have 2 speaker cards, Ms. Susan Bassey and Mr. Scott Largent. Come on up, whoever which.
We're Rochambeau, and you see who goes.
Oh, good. Oh. Do rock. She had rock.
Oh. Ladies first.
This is to receive the annual report from the Office of Women's Policy relating to Domestic Violence Trust Fund.
Thank you. And Supervisor Yeager just left, and I meant to tell him his comments earlier about nobody reading the San Jose Mercury might not be viewed so positively by my colleagues at the Mercury.
I won't tell you where he is, but he can hear you.
And I think Jeff Rosen and Patricia Lucas didn't get that memo because they tend to use the Mercury regularly for opinion page in order to promote their own campaigns. This item talks about domestic violence policies, and Mr. Wasserman, you were stating earlier that you're a numbers man and you want to pay attention to that. So you might notice in the report that for fiscal year 2018, Santa Clara County collected from 3 sources $354,631. I have to check my public records, but I think that's probably less than 25 cents per victim of domestic violence in this county. The failures of domestic violence are very real. Last night, a man in Utah flew an airplane into his wife's house. He did that following an arrest for domestic violence. The system worked. The sheriff accompanied him in to get his personal belongings. Hours later, he got his plane, flew under the wires, and smashed into his wife's house. Our system cannot protect from domestic violence. This is a community effort that we need everybody doing. And everybody who has sat here and listened to people like Ms. Powers speak about how judges are treating her in her family law case. And every time Jeff Rosen gets a complaint about domestic violence or fraud or things happening in our family courts, and he says that's not his job, he's failing. We're inefficient, we're not following policies, we're not following laws, and we're giving our courts too much power, and it has to stop. And it is time to start holding these judges accountable. It's time to start solving these issues as a society and as a community. And it's time to start putting the $1.6 billion our government gives us to deal with women and domestic violence issues into the hands of victims. Thank you.
Mr. Largen, come on up. And Mr., I believe you said Lazarin? Please, you'll be up next.
My bad. I brought all the binders today. Some days I do that. I started attending every single domestic violence subcommittee and regular committee meetings. Our domestic violence system in our county is a failure. I think the first 7 meetings I went to, quorum was never made. They couldn't get anything done in these committees. I was absolutely shocked. Now, the reason I went there, I guess technically I am a customer of domestic violence. I had a restraining order against me. It became civil and peaceful 3 weeks after it was issued, but it was the language on here. And I kept asking for clarification on the language on this order. And as you can see, I printed all these things, in the beginning of all this stuff, explaining civil, peaceful. I had San Jose PD watch commanders writing what it was. I kept asking, what do you consider civil and peaceful? I started figuring out the difference between civil restraining orders, criminal orders, all this just wealth of information that we cannot even access for our domestic violence counsel. We do not have dedicated staff. We do not have a website for any of that stuff. I understand it's ran out of the Women's Policy Department, and they have their own website, but we need our independent stuff. It could have been a one-stop shop for this stuff. I could have gone online, and it could have said, hey, this is what this order is. This is what you need to do. Now, in case you guys didn't realize this, the reason the language, you cannot understand it, is they want you to keep going back into the system and keep feeding it, okay? Because when you show this to law enforcement, they say, hey, we don't know what to do. Go back to court. And what do you normally do? Go spend more money with attorneys, more money with experts, filing more motions. And you kind of keep feeding that. My daughter's 3 right now. I'm not going to do that for the next 15 years. I'm really not. And if I still owned an electronics business like I did, I could only imagine what I would have thrown into the system. This is shameful, and you guys could really, start paying attention. Maybe just show up to some of the domestic violence subcommittees and just sit back and watch it fall apart. So thank you.
Thank you, council members. Once again, my name is Michael Lazarin, and I sit here as a father, and I ask everyone here, how many children voices are being not heard? My daughter, Audrey Pott, for national headlines under Mr. Rosen, and he could sit there with his smirk, basically hid domestic violence that was going on in my daughter's home life 6 to 12 months before her suicide. And I asked myself, these three boys that sexually assaulted my child, it's taken my family everything to heal from this. And I sit here 3 months ago trying to heal after 5.5 years. And I see our sheriff on national television on the Web of Lies in uniform, standing, supporting a false narrative that happened to my child on national television. It needs to stop. These boys did something very bad to my daughter, and my family has forgiven them. But my daughter's therapists were reaching out and asking, because of the domestic violence that was going on in her home life, for help. And nobody helped my child. Why? Why has it taken 5 years before somebody came and asked me what was going on in my daughter's home life? Why? How would you feel as a parent? I'm sitting here 6 years later with no answers.
Thank you. That concludes the public portion of item number 7. Don't see any speaker lights on. Supervisor Yeager? I have nothing more either to say, so we'll consider that report received. That concludes item number 7. 8, 9, and 10 were handled in consent. This meeting is now adjourned to September 19th in the same board chambers at 2 p.m. Thank you all. Thanks, sir.